Hello, this is Humanity and Beyond. I'm Tyler James. With me today is Dr. Avinash Singh. He is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Technology in Sydney. He also speaks for Transhumanism Australia. So, if I may, Avi, outside of COVID, what have you been up to for the past couple of years?
Yeah, well, even though it's outside of COVID, but still affected from the COVID. Working from home, partially office, doing a lot of reading and stuff like that. Very few experiment, which is my primary thing, which maybe you're going to talk in the following session within today. Which I do lots of experiment with the human, which has become very little because of COVID, of course, affected a lot, unfortunately. So not so much that, but same time, super excited what happening around the world in the field I am in, which is BCI, Brain Computer Interface. And yeah, exciting time, although it's a COVID, but still exciting time in last 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're getting towards the endemic phase, or, we're at least going to be getting to some sense of normalcy by the end of this year. It's just a matter of, when the WHO does its own thing, which, it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, as you were talking about, you work heavily with the brain-computer interfaces, and I guess for clarification for people who are maybe not as familiar with those, they are generally implants that are put into the brain. A lot of them have been used to help patients with Parkinson's or who, suffer with a lot of severe strokes, right? And the way that these things have been developing, or at least the way that we've been trying to develop them, is so that they are augmenting our intellectual abilities. Am I right on that? Is there some clarification that you want to make?
So you're pretty much right. You covered a most essential reason behind the BCI. So brain computer interface, that's how it sounds like, but it's much more than that. And somehow the original goal is always started from medical purpose. Like you say, people with paralysis, people with some kind of lock-in syndrome, people who want to communicate. That's where the actual goal and actual desire come from about the BCI. Why not we just use the brain and communicate from the things around us? But since then to now, BCI changed a lot in terms of application point of view, and the purpose what BCI originally meant for, that's also happening. But at the same time, it's not just limited with the people with a certain kind of disease or problem, but also with healthy people like you and me to use and extend our ability. And that's why I somehow connected with some of my other achievement or other kind of goal or other interests, like a transhumanism, because it's a straight out of sci-fi kind of thing. If you see it in a broader picture, what BCI kind of can do, I mean, in the future, and actually already happening around the world at this moment, that it can extend your ability, how you can control, you become sort of Jedi, sort of, if I say or quote the Star Wars kind of character. You control things from, just by thinking, that kind of thing. And somehow human always desire to have such kind of power. But of course, I will not call them power, but a more of extended ability with the help of devices. So that's all a BCI is all about.
Well, and obviously you do speak for Transhumanism Australia. You're very involved in that space out where you're at. But I guess one of the big questions that might need some clarity about, and I'll quote here Emerson Pug, who historically should have been the first person to say, if the human brain were so simple that we could understand it, we would be so simple that we couldn't. So, I mean, you talk about brain being remapping or reprogramming, but I mean, realistically, the brain is a very complex thing, and not even this human brain project that was initiated between Canada and the EU is pulling out all the different.
Well, first to answer this, I want to go back to your quote, as you mentioned. That's an interesting quote to put in that way, and that's very true. But you need to understand one very interesting thing, which is always I quote to people, that whatever you are saying about the brain is also coming from your brain. Brain saying himself is the best thing. So brain is saying, it's generated from your brain, and the brain suggesting you that I am the best. So brain saying himself that brain is the best thing, a best organ in your body. It's so complicated. You can't do this, I can't do that. It's also coming from your brain. So kind of you are in, this question comes around the free will and stuff like that, which I'm not touching. It's a completely different topic. But if I talk about in terms of complexity, so there's another saying that the understanding universe and understanding brain is like a two most complicated problem in the world, which is very, very true. Given the complexity, given the understanding we have so far, that's what it suggests. And we still do not have a capability to really understand the brain very well, because simply we do not have certain kind of devices and tools required to understand brain at very, very core level. But regardless of that, as science progress, it's always progress one step at a time. We already progress pretty, so much that we can understand some basic function pretty well. We can already able to map certain kind of, what I should say, certain kind of animal that, for example, fruit fly, that can, their neurons, their whole brain structure can be mapped properly, and we understood every function they do using their brain signal. So that kind of things already happened within the neuroscience, within cognitive neuroscience. And that is somehow related with BCI as well, because this gave us a better understanding what's going on with the BCI, what's possible with the BCI. For example, there's a few projects already happened in last more than 10 years. I have a list here. Let me quickly go through it. So one of those projects is, for example, called Open Worm. It's a project where it's a roundworm elegans. It contains only 302 neurons, and the research is able to map each and single neurons and how they connected and communicate. This is pretty well developed project, openly available for people, but people don't know too much about it. And somehow still it dictates somehow the rules and regulation about the BCI. Another is called Blue Brain Project, which started in 2005 for mouse brain too, which is a much bigger brain and have lots of processing in the like a human does. Another one is a Human Brain Project, which is also about more about human brain, which is still running project. So these are the kind of project funded by large government, and they again somehow connected with the BCI. Why BCI? Because once you understand brain better, you can also have a better control over it. Now the problem is that, or the major gap between these two things, understanding the brain and connecting brain with the BCI, is tools. Currently, what tools we have? We have one of the most famous tool in the BCI field is called EEG. It's an electroencephalogram that read brain electricity. Basically, whenever our neuron, a cell, which dictate or create our brain, fire this EEG equipment, which is on the top of your head, try to catch the signal, and then you can use the signal to convert in different kind of communication media or control. That's the one. It's good, but it's covered just on the surface of the head. That's all. And then on the other hand, we have much more precise devices like fMRI. But of course, fMRI is not suitable kind of device because you need a big room just to hold the device. It's impossible to use as a BCI equipment. So that's where we are at this moment. And I hope new devices like implants, not the Neuralink, which is nice and fancy, but still far away from what we would supposed to be achieved with the BCI. We need some kind of a nano BCI that can embed with our brain and every cell, and then we can understand, same time control using our thoughts, which doesn't exist. But hope is that when nanotechnology will develop more, this technology will also evolve apparently. That's kind of a
That's a big
quite
hope that I have
summarized
for.
way of, yeah.
Seems like the internet's doing its thing again.
And
Connectivity.
also I'm sitting in the room which automatically shut down its light, not by BCI, believe me.
Well, and I guess I should ask as well. I mean, obviously we're talking about these very simple organisms, but when we're talking about the human subject itself, our biochemistry is different from one individual to the next. And so our
That's true.
brains are going to be naturally different from one another. So even if we were to have a common map, as it were, is it not going to be really, really difficult for us to reprogram it in a way that's consistent?
Well, that's very true. And you talk about biochemistry. I'm talking about very basic part where we already face this issue. So like I mentioned, EEG-based BCI. And the one EEG signal of same stuff, same goal, same task is very different from one person to another. And that's where actually artificial come in the play. So we use lots of machine learning technique to kind of overcome this gap. And what we try to do, we try to accommodate the difference between one person to another person when we try the same BCI among them. Although maybe it doesn't work that well from one person to another, but it kind of, what should I say, it kind of able to mitigate this gap as much as possible, just using machine learning techniques. So BCI is not just reading signal, but BCI is also a lot about artificial intelligence, I should say here. And it's a combination of both. And given the current progress in artificial intelligence technique, this thing actually evolving much faster than ever before, especially in last 5 years. There's such a boost in machine learning technique and method and the community around the world. And same as actually with the BCI as well. There's such a boost. I think perhaps I would say the boost in BCI is because of some of the big name came in the play, like Elon Musk and Facebook, this kind of company. Maybe that's why it's a boost also there. But this gap can't be really 100% can be fulfilled by this technology, of course. But the good thing is that brain on the other hand, so you can say every component is kind of contributing itself. BCI technology doing to read the signal. Artificial intelligence try to mitigate the gap between difference between one person to another. Then there's a third thing, which is the brain itself. And it's highly, what we call it, neuroadaptive, or I should say there's another word for that, neuroplasticity. Brain is very good to adapt. Let's say brain working in certain way, A, but if certain A is not working for the brain, then brain slowly adapt to a certain way of B. And when this adaptation happens, brain start working in different way. You can see this example, people with suddenly lost an arm, suddenly lost a certain limb in their body, suddenly miss a certain kind of ability they have, or they kind of have a certain kind of mental disease. They always adapting. That's quite a very human thing. It's not human thing, it's a brain thing, which pretty much apply to every single organism in this world, or maybe beyond, if they exist, I believe. So this neuroplasticity is an amazing thing, and still nobody really know how does it work, but brain always adapt. So if you give it less or if you give it more, it just adapted. So those differences between one brain to another can be adapted in these ways.
Okay. And then I guess while we're still on the topic, while I still have some time, maybe we should talk a little bit about the question of interoperability. Like if we're talking specifically about implants, obviously one of the issues with the signal transmission is the signal needing to get through the bone and the blood and the brain and the external tissues and connect to the world around it. And that's part of the reason why we've had such a struggle with this, especially with the EEGs, with the fMRIs. You know, we can only penetrate so far into the gray matter because the signal transmission not only takes time, but it's difficult to penetrate too far without causing damage to the body. So, I don't know. Are we limited, I guess we should say, only to implants, or is there the potential for us to have, say, things that maybe can tap into the central nervous system and transmit those signals for us so that we're not having to keep everything constrained to the neurocortex?
That's a good idea. Definitely, it's a good idea. And to be honest, there have been some work. Even I have tried few experiments in the past in very early time. And exact same reasoning, like you mentioned to me, not everything we do from the brain cortex or brain stem itself, but why not we look at the CNS, central nervous system, or in very simple word, our spinal cord, because spinal cord is like the passing wire where every signal is passing through our body and dictating our limb what to do. And I was focusing on the problem where I want to control or I want to understand their motor activity, for example, moving hand or moving leg. And this all goes through the spinal cord or CNS, of course. But when you try that, there's a problem with that. The spinal cord, for instance, if I say in more simple words, the spinal cord it's a bone structure, of course. And all those nerves passing through the spinal cord, which create a CNS, central nervous system, and spread through the body, it's just such a strongly embedded in the spinal cord that it's so difficult to read, at least from external sensor. But if you want to invade a bit of spinal cord and try to touch the like a more of implant kind of design, then there's always a super strong danger that you kind of damage the nerve. And if you damage the nerve, it could be paralyze the human being you are experimenting. So it's a very dangerous procedure if you want to go for implant. But if you just want to stick the electrode on the top of the skin, then you pretty much get nothing because of the very strong structure of bones in there, and those all nerve is just in there. It's completely different from the brain. Brain also get a skull, right? We still get the electrode stick on the head and try to read the signal. But this skull is a much more flat surface. It's not a flat surface, of course. It's a skull, but it's the same thickness all over the skull, and everything under the skull is a brain. But for the spinal cord, it's like a more of a rotated helix design, sort of. It just arranged in the way that everything passes through it, and it's very difficult to read. But that's always a nice solution. And I think, I do not know personally, but I know there's a few work tried to attempt, and people sometimes also call it spinal cord computer interface, or SCI. Which is, or you can also call them CNS-based interface, like you just mentioned. So it's a nice way, and it can go beyond that. But again, the fundamental thing when you say brain-computer interface is very different than CNS interface. CNS doesn't generate those signals. CNS just is a line which passes through the information generated in the brain. And tapping the brain is very different than tapping the CNS. It's not the same thing. It's more about like you are tapping in the muscles, which themselves is not doing the act. They are doing the act as following the signal and brain signal from our originating in the brain or from the thought. So they were not near anywhere what BCI offers. For example, a paralysis person. Why BCI is useful in paralysis person? Because paralysis always go from down the neck. Your eyes usually can move, your ear can listen. Maybe you can't move your neck and your throat, so you can't speak, but you can pretty much hear and see things. Maybe you can't interpret that well. Your brain always working. Brain never go paralyzed. Brain always working. It send the signal, do things for you. So you can tap here. But if you talk about CNS system for paralyzed, that's the place where they got broken, and that's why they have paralysis. So you can't really have a good connection from there. And maybe that's the general idea behind the BCI, that why not we just go straight to the brain, because brain is everything in the body, pretty much, that define our personality.
Now, I know we're running a little short on time here, Ave, so let me move us along to just more a topic about transhumanism, bionics, enhancing the human form in general. Because And I should clarify, we did have our conversation with Zoltan a couple episodes back where we went into more of the heavier political aspect of things. But I want to try to take a different approach here. So, obviously, we're worried about what's going to happen with cyborgs, or, the cyborgization, as it were, of the human species, where we're integrating technology into ourselves. Some of us in the field, like myself, are worried about what's going to happen to our basic rights. Are we going to be forced to have these technologies embedded into us? So I guess my big fear here is, even if we do get to the point where the BCIs are non-damaging to the patient, where we're not having to go in and continuously do surgeries to maintenance it or to maybe swap it out with a newer model, because obviously the invasive procedures are very tricky and damaging over a long period of time. I think that that's something that we have to emphasize when we're talking about BCIs. It's just the invasive nature of procedures. It's not good for the body's health. And, it's something that we like to gloss over because we understand that underlying problem. Yeah. But, the technology is still not to the point where we have to talk about it on a daily basis. But, I guess, would you envision that we would need to maybe give ourselves some protections to remain untechnologically enhanced? I mean, we already have nootropics, whether that be pharmaceuticals or caffeine, the coffee, and we can already enhance ourselves in these manners. So why do we need the technology when, we can interface with things and we're not having to harm our bodies in very, very, invasive manners?
Well, it's all about how you construct this, right? You mentioned a coffee, which is a great example. It's a drug we take pretty much, most of us take every day, and it has highly invasive in the nature. We just drinking it, and once we drink it, it just spread all over our body and just try to indicate our brain, don't let us sleep, put us more active, and create certain kind of chemical in the brain that let us being more active and work. That's what coffee does to our body. Highly invasive. Okay. It may sound not, but it's highly invasive. We are drinking it. Well, only nature of invasiveness different here compared to the BCI is that you are not operating someone. And also you are taking it willingly with more as a food. Actually, every single food is invasive in nature, to be honest. You take a drug, certain specific kind of drug, which can give you a quite of hallucination, and on long term, you damage your brain and your body, right? And you take a coffee, even coffee, which is itself a drug, or sugar, which is itself a drug, is a highly invasive nature, and you get addicted, and you face several other kind of problem, like people being a fat, or people being suffering for sleepiness problem, or these kind of thing happen. So technology, what will someone will do if I say, okay, these are the nanosensor within the coffee you have. This nanosensor will enable a BCI for you. And this nanosensor is mixed with the coffee, and you can easy to drink coffee already. Even though I mentioned this nanosensor in the coffee, and it tastes good. It may taste like some kind of sugary content for you. It's nothing different. And maybe people will hesitate in the beginning, but maybe over the time it become very normal to drink every once or twice a week as some nanosensor with your coffee or with your drink. So it still has an invasive nature, isn't it? It still has an invasive. Only difference here is that those nanosensor is a human-built nanosensor. That's not naturally coming from some plant or some other place. Only difference is that this is human-built. Forget about nanosensor. If I say, we talk about, again, touching bit of COVID here. Those COVID-based vaccination is also human structured, human created it. And that's going in our body. It's also very invasive. Only difference between this invasiveness and the invasiveness of opening your brain and putting something in is that We call it minimal invasive and a highly invasive. So you don't need to operate in this case. So every time when nanostructure involved, you don't never operate human body. You just simply give them using a syringe or using a drink like we having a coffee. So it's all about how you put that or how you present it, to be honest. And what you're saying, does it needed or not? Why we already have this kind of stuff around us. Well, it's all about desire to explore. And you touch our topic of transhumanism. Transhumanism is all about that how much will you have over you to do what you like. And when I say what you like, it's not about following a passion, but more about exploration. Let's say you want to go deep in that space, keep traveling. But being a human in this human body, which is limited to up to 100 years or sometimes 110, with limitation of oxygen requirement, food requirement, and other physical limitation, you can't really travel like a 200 years in the deep space or 1,000 years in the deep space. But transhumanism idea or the whole movement kind of offer this kind of upgrade that let you, maybe you just cryogenic sleep and just keep traveling. Or maybe you just prolonged life you have, or you are digitally uploaded in the computer, or you are a ship which traveling because your brain and the ship is merged together. We want that. Maybe not everyone want that. Everyone, maybe some other people have other goals, but being human, we are always a curious creature. We always want to explore. But we are already an outside our limit of exploration. So we need to enhance ourselves, not just by aging point of view, physical point of view, cognitive point of view, but from all the angles. And because of this enhancement needed, we need to do much beyond than what nature provided us. Nature also kind of upgrade us all the time. We evolve. But evolve process is a bit slow. We want to manufacture this evolvement artificially embed in our body. And that's where technology kind of work as a catalyst, put in the middle and overcome this gap. And over the time, you also find that we will evolve to adapt the technology, and we will do lots of things which we not able to do so far. And that's also where transhumanism idea also come in the scene. And I hope I'm making sense here.
No, you're making perfect sense to me, and I hope that the audience is able to parse it out as well, because obviously some of us are a lot more familiar with transhumanism than others. And I know, again, Zoltan added his clarity as well. Do you have time for one more question, or do we need to wrap up?
I'm free. I have time. We can go for a while. Yeah.
Okay. So let me just ask this last question then. If the idea is to explore, if the idea is to give us maybe more capabilities, more capacities, as it were, if we're taken into, say, Amartya Sen's terms, absolutely love his work with the capabilities approach. What kind of strain do you see that having on medical systems? Because I know every nation has its own different way of structuring things. Obviously, we have the single-payer system here in the U.S., it's very complicated to actually get medical care because of all the hoops you have to jump through. But, you can say that about a lot of other different countries as well, even though they're more social. So if BCIs were to become available tomorrow, and it's recommended that everybody get them, no matter whether we're doing the highly invasive or the minimally invasive. What sort of strain do you see that putting on the medical system, which is already overburdened by COVID and will likely continue to see a lot of burdens in the years to come after this pandemic's through?
Well, that's actually a very interesting question, and really it could be a completely itself a topic to discuss. My feeling is that there could be two directions can be taken if we talk about medical system, how these medical devices, especially enhancement of brain, maybe initially some government officials in some countries see is more of a cosmetic thing, like a cosmetic surgery, those things doesn't really part of the medical system. So they just put in that category and just, avoid it. Do by yourself, pay by yourself,
right?
Just do if you like. I don't care. And government doesn't care. But I also think there's a people who really need that, essential people, or medically people who medically sick or medically ill, like for people with depression, for instance, or people with Parkinson. They need a BCI technology maybe much more than the healthy people. Healthy people can be on the second stage, but first stage is these people. And my understanding that government or countries or these officials should support in that BCI technology can do much more of these people, I believe, to make them become normal. I'm not saying enhance, but let them become normal. And now let's talk about enhancement. I think government should also partially support enhancement, maybe not fully, maybe there's a issue, maybe there's other concern, because government policy is always about minimal viability, and maybe for them enhancing is not minimal viability. You already are a normal human being, your brain works pretty fine, you can do the job, but why you want to enhance your cognition? Maybe that's a question. But I think it should be allowed at certain point. Government should support at certain point, because if they don't support, what will going to happen? It will create some kind of polarity in the society, where maybe a rich able to access this technology, but poor can't access it. And when rich are able to access have better cognitive enhancement, they are able to do something much more they are already able to do because of money and power they have, and then they have intelligence as well. They're just going to create a completely new, a big kind of wall between the poor and the rich, very clear. So if government doesn't support this kind of agenda, then it will gonna create this kind of societal pole between two kind of society. And I think that's very important thing to talk about. And that's why, like I said, transhumanism movement, it's not just about developing technology, it's also about putting this policy and pushing toward the government so that they can listen us and they can implement some of this policy. This is not beyond their goal. For example, I was the part of International Longevity Alliance. I was the board member in them, and because of their effort, ILA's effort, ILA is in France, International Longevity Alliance. WHO recently listed longevity and aging as a disease. So once you reflect this policy at that certain high level, then from WHO it will reflect to the different country, because WHO associated with multiple countries. And when it associated with the countries, then country will create some kind of, environment, some kind of funding mechanism, some kind of policy mechanism, and then more people start involving, and there's a stir happen among conversation among the government to avoid around this technology like a BCI. So it's important. It's important topic to discuss. But to be honest, I hope government support. That's my opinion. I hope government support this kind of thing. Otherwise, if there's no support available, there will be quite a problematic thing will happen. And again, COVID is again good example for me. What happened with the COVID is because technology have more accessible for example, US, because it has been developed there. So number of people who get vaccine in US compared to any other country, let's say Africa, is completely different. Why? Africa doesn't have access of this technology at all. Doesn't have access of vaccine. And because they don't have access of vaccine, the mutation in the viruses keep going up, and they keep having new mutation of viruses there. And why is happening? And because of this virus mutation happen, it's spread all over the world again, and people getting booster now. It's number 3, vaccine number 3, and maybe number 4 and 5 in coming years. But this polarity is happening just because they do not have enough vaccine for them, or technology is not available there. And of course, government is also poor. But I'm just trying to highlight here that how easily difference between rich and poor you can be seen in very simple kind of environment or pandemic like COVID happening around us. Same could happen with BCI, same could happen with longevity in future. So we will need to be very concerned about that in terms of policy, how to shape it, how to distribute it. And I always say we need to democratize the technology so that everyone have available for them and they're easy to access it. So I hope that will be the case with the technology. Otherwise, we might have some significant issue in future.
And I guess I should clarify, when we're talking about getting people back to normal, we're just talking about ensuring that they are re-enabled. So going from a quote unquote disabled state to a abled state, right?
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, just want to get that language out there, because I know to some people it's a bit of a hot button topic. So I want to make sure that we're using the language that's available to us, and we're not trying to segregate from one population to the next. We're just ensuring that the common dialogue is there.
Fair enough. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, the whole purpose I'm trying to say, so disabled people, I'm not even saying disabled, I would say just they're suffering from certain problem, depression, for instance, and this affect their regular activity. They can't do the work they're supposed to do normally like everyone else do without depression. So they are not disabled in a way, but they are having difficulty to do the things, and BCI technology could help them to come back to on that track where they can do things normally as everyone else do without depression. So yeah, enable them much more activeness like everyone else have without depression, a similar kind of mental problem, mental disease.
I think I should wrap this up, but thank you so very much for your time today, Avi. Are there any last minute items that we haven't addressed here that you want to just bring up, or?
Well, I would just say that, yes, exactly. I would just say BCI technology is nothing to afraid of, or not just BCI technology, any technology is nothing to afraid of. And science tried to push the boundaries in a way that we were able to enhance ourselves. And again, enhancement is not new thing. It's happening since the histories of history, 1,000 or 1,000 and 2,000 years. I mean, very nice and simple example is that how medicine able to, treat ourselves, and we already have an enhanced lifelong age that was not before. Just 50 years ago, the average age is like a 60s, and now average age is reached to 80 or 85 or 90 years in some place. We already enhance our longevity. We already enhance our aging because we are able to keep our body healthy just because of medicine and doctor and technology, thanks to the science. Same happening with the current scenario. And humans have this trend to afraid initially, but over the time they adapt. And again, this adaptation, new technology, and this is nothing new. It sounds fancy, it sounds quite beyond what more of coming from the sci-fi, but to be honest, it's nothing new. It's always the enhancement is a thing with the human, and we always keep enhancing ourselves, and that's what's happening now, and will also keep happening in the future. So because it's not new, so we should not be afraid as well. We should not be feeling worried as well. Of course, need a policy around it, and like always, policy will be able to build. We learn about it, we learn the lesson, we always go back and try to make things in better way. And that's what also happening around the world again in terms of BCI technology as well, or even transhumanism related ideas we're talking about here. It's not new. Because it's not new, so nothing to be afraid. That's what I would say in the end, which may be missed in discussion today.